Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our latest Posturite webinar. What does mental health support at work look like? Everyone is saying hello to each other in the chat. So, yeah, feel free to tell us where you're from. It's good to see that people, mainly from the UK, but we've just had, I was going to see who was the furthest away. We had a Bahrain, and then we've just been, that was beaten by someone dialing in from Mauritius. So that's just makes us all in the UK feel a little bit colder than we already were. So, yeah, welcome everybody. I'm from a fairly damp and cold Chester, so hopefully some of us are in a sunnier climate than a lot of us are currently in the UK. Good to see so many familiar faces on the chat and signed up for today. So thank you for everyone that has signed up again and engaged with us, sent in questions, saying hello. We really do appreciate it. My name is Andy Rigby. I am one of the enablement leads here at Posturite, our division that helps many organisations with neurodiversity, disability assessments, and workplace adjustments, both directly and via access to work, both in the UK and globally. Today's webinar is being recorded as usual. It will be available for replay on our website at posturite.co.uk/webinars. All our previous webinars are listed on there. So there are topics such as DSE, ergonomics, ADHD, autism, menopause. There's many webinars that are listed on there. So I do encourage people to go and have a listen. Do reach out to us at enablement@posturite.co.uk if you have any queries, both on this webinar or previous webinars, or do feel free to contact me directly at andyrigby@posturite.co.uk. It's always great to hear from you and to receive your feedback. A follow-up email from today will be sent within 24 hours to everyone that's registered with everything, slides, presentation, contact details, when to send your queries. Those registered should have also received the slides yesterday in preparation, so hopefully you had those as well. Today's session, for today's session, please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A box. So continue to use the chat, but if it is specifically a question, if that can go in the Q&A box, I will see it. Please note that your question is visible to everyone and participants can vote on them to prioritise those they'd like me to ask the panelists. So, yeah, we encourage you to get involved. I think one of the big parts of these webinars is how everybody does get involved, comes together, supports each other in the chat, and asks some really interesting and amazing questions. So, yeah, continue to do that. We have received a number of questions already, which we'll try our very best to get through as many as we can. So thank you to those that have sent questions in. If we don't manage to go through your question today, we will reach out to you via email in the coming days. For accessibility, Zoom supports live captioning. This can be activated and deactivated within your account settings under the meeting tab. Click automated captions to enable or disable this. So to our webinar. Last few years have seen one of the biggest shifts in working patterns possibly ever, or certainly in a very long time. Remote working, hybrid models, and evolving workplace spaces have reshaped not just where we work, but how we feel about work itself. But have we truly stopped to think about the impact this has had on our mental health and those around us? Today, I'm joined by Rachael Hill and Natalia Finnegan to discuss this in much more detail. Rachael is a registered mental health nurse with extensive experience in health and well-being in both private and public sectors. Rachael also facilitates awareness sessions in both ADHD and menopause and supports many individuals with disabilities and learning difficulties. Natalia has been a wellness manager at TELUS Digital since 2022 and has a master's in leadership in workplace health and well-being and specialises in a strategic approach to workplace well-being. Natalia's experience includes project management roles, and she's passionate about using these tools to deliver systematic and quantifiable wellness initiatives. So, without further delay, I'll pass you over to Rachael.
Hello, sorry, I think there was a bit of a technical issue there with my camera. Good to see everyone. And it's good to see people from all over the place, especially Mauritius. Wow. I'm in Scotland, which is not known for the sun, as some of you may well be aware. Thank you, Posturite, for inviting me today to talk about such a a serious subject, a subject that, I don't think we really talk about as much as it should be spoken about. Um, I was just saying to the team there before, I'm going to keep it real, in line with the theme, well-being at work, mental health. I can get quite anxious, and I'm a bit anxious at the minute. This is the first time I've spoke to as many people as there are here. I was that employee 2 years ago that I struggled to speak in a team, in the team meetings above two, if there was more than two people. So yeah, I just wanted to keep that real. And I think what I'm going to ask is that Andy lead with the slides and I contribute, if that's all right, Andy. I
Yeah,
don't know if I'm,
yeah,
yeah.
come back in. I'm here.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's go.
So we've got well-being at work. We're going to cover connecting with others through the power of story, because I've certainly learned a compassionate approach to well-being throughout my career is a key ingredient in effectiveness and engagement. And we're going to look at how we can share our stories. And by stories, I just mean sharing how we feel, how we are, if that feels comfortable, you know, and how to recognize when others, I suppose, may be communicating their story, like I have with you there. I suppose I did with Andy earlier, didn't I, as well? And, how we can change that story, I suppose, like I am being here today, challenging myself and moving forward in terms of my well-being in relation to anxiety. Next slide, please, Andy. So today I'm going to, I suppose, refer to well-being and mental health. And I think it's important that, yes, we know the difference, but I think they're both interlinked. We'll all have, I suppose, a different understanding of what well-being is, and that's okay, and what mental health is. We'll all experience it differently. We'll all have a different understanding. We might have relatives that struggle with a mental health diagnosis. We might be struggling with a mental health diagnosis and not even know about it, you know. Certainly I didn't for years. I knew I was struggling, but I just kind of powered through, and it was when I reached out for help that things really changed. So I just want you to really look at those definitions there, but please understand that they're all interlinked. And I think that, our mental health will impact our well-being, and our well-being will impact our mental health. So if we can look after them and we can cultivate a work environment that supports well-being and mental health, then I think, we've got a strong start. Next slide, please, Andy. So why story and narrative? I suppose I chose this because I saw some of the research, about the power of telling our stories and the impact that can have. But also, when I've worked with clients or patients throughout the years, and, in considering myself and my own story, I've seen the power that that can have in terms of people not feeling alone, in terms of people feeling hopeful. So story can promote connection to ourselves and with our colleagues. And I would encourage you, throughout these slides, I want to kind of provoke a curiosity, if you like. So I would encourage you to keep active in the chat if that feels comfortable for you. How often have you sort of sat with a colleague that you wouldn't usually sit with, learn something different about them, and in turn it changed how you related to them, It offers a different perspective. It can challenge our preconceived ideas of others and how we relate to the world around us. Is there an interaction where you've kind of judged someone, because that's human to judge someone, and changed our judgment when we've understood that person a bit better or when we've seen them differently because they've communicated something to us. story can help us understand, or gain an understanding and compassion for others. Has someone ever disclosed a hidden disability to you, for example, and actually you've changed the way that you think about them, or you've adapted, how you interact with them? And story can help us learn and grow. If we're managers, for example, we're team leaders, what we want, what we like. I would hope that that would be supported and that can help us learn and grow. And I know that learning and growing is supportive for wellbeing. So overall, story can support us to work together to improve everyone's experience at work.
I think it's a nice reminder, Rachel, because I think every time we speak to people generally, everyone's really busy. Everyone will say, how's things? Yeah, everything's really busy. But it's a nice timely reminder to take that time out, isn't it? And actually, the power of asking someone a question is significant in particularly in this sense, and just getting to know people. It's quite a basic thing when you think about it in reality, isn't it? But actually, how many times do we practice it? It's a very nice reminder, and the power of actually somebody asking you a question and how that impact can have, what impact that can have on an individual, can be huge, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if we think of a time when we've shared something before, maybe, and it's had a positive impact, that relief and things generally sometimes get better, when we share what's going on, how we're feeling, if that feels safe to do so. So I'm hoping you're gaining an understanding of just how powerful connecting with others can be in terms of well-being. Can we get to the next slide, please, Andy? And yeah, here's some of the research, I suppose, I looked at earlier. Research findings have suggested social connection should be prioritised as a public health issue due to its significant impact on overall health and well-being. Sharing personal stories allows individuals to feel heard, validated, which can reduce anxiety and stress. So I think we've all probably got stories where we can relate to those statistics. Certainly I felt, with my colleagues where I felt I've had a really good team and supportive team, it's definitely improved my well-being at work. I felt less stressed, and I felt more able to communicate, with others and feel supported, which is just so important, I can see you are getting really engaging in the chat. I appreciate that. I'm just looking at
There's
some of them.
lots
Yeah.
lots of individual stories, and I think
Stories. Yeah, there you
yeah,
go.
all very powerful. There's reasons behind
Mm.
how people react to things, how people behave. There's always reasons
Yeah,
behind it, and yeah, I think there's some really excellent examples in the chat currently. Yeah.
great. Can we get the next slide, please? So my story, I suppose, I've mentioned there, when we share our stories, it's of course important for it to feel comfortable, or appropriate or safe to do so. And I appreciate, everyone will have their individual story. And some people might not like to share, and that's okay. I suppose I'm sharing today because I was thinking, who can benefit from hearing my story? So I am fortunate enough to work with Posturite to help people who have experienced, as I have experienced, Um, I've experienced issues with my mental health since I was a small child. I really struggled within the school environment. I left school with failed GCSEs. And at 17, I went to do nursing, but I quit after a month because I was struggling. I was really struggling, and I didn't know it was that. I kind of internalized it and think, is there something the matter with me? But there wasn't. I just didn't understand what was happening. And at 22, I went to study nursing again. And that's not to say I didn't find it challenging, but my friends really supported me. Again, connection. My friends perhaps saw that I was struggling when I wasn't aware. And I think it's important to know that we're not always aware ourselves. Sometimes we're the last person to see when we're struggling. So I think in an employee environment or an employer, it's, I think, really beneficial to be able to see and understand when someone's struggling. and there you can implement that support. So I qualified as a nurse about 10, 11 years ago. And in all my jobs, I would only ever stay a year. I felt really, really misunderstood. I struggled particularly with managers and leaders, because I felt like they weren't understanding me. But obviously I was in a position at the time where I didn't feel confident enough. I didn't understand what was going on, but I didn't also feel confident enough to share. But I do wonder, actually, if those working environments were different, perhaps they would have noticed, and maybe that support would have been increased, So, in my 30s, I sought help, which was great. And that really changed my relationship with myself and therefore how I relate to people in the world around us. And I was really blessed to be employed and to share, employment with just such a compassionate, wonderful team. And my manager took time to recognize and listen to my experience. And that completely changed my life. And we've all got, various bits of a story, haven't we? I consider it like we've got a jigsaw of life, and there's little bits that make that up. But I can confidently say if that manager hadn't have taken the time, there's absolutely no way I would have had the confidence to have the business I do now and to do what I do now. So I will be, forever grateful for that. And, the managers and the leaders who are listening, please don't underestimate the impact you can have on people's lives, and therefore their mental health and well-being.
And I think you mentioned then, Rachel, you used the word changed your life, which is probably not a more powerful sentence that you can say in that respect. As this actually changed my life. And just to pick up on one point, because there's a lot of people sort of say virtually nodding their heads at your story as well, is we often talk about opening up and the ability to open up, and actually the powerful thing of and have that confidence to say, actually, I want to have a conversation around this. And you mentioned that previously you struggled with managers. We've often spoke, particularly in terms of neurodiversity, about having multiple channels to actually, and more than one opportunity to actually have a conversation with someone, because actually people may not, and I'm being brutally honest, people might not want to speak to the line manager about something, and having those multiple channels is quite an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's it exactly, Andy. Not everyone feels safe or comfortable, and that's what I said about the story, to share their story. But please understand, I think someone said there, where did how did you find help? I went to my GP first and foremost, but there's loads of mental health services, and I engaged in therapies, and I think someone said there, managers need that support, don't they, to understand how they can support, their team as well. So I think that's important. Again, I was talking about a jigsaw before. I suppose they're all the pieces to a jigsaw of well-being, and good mental health at work. But, I share that story because also, like I did at the beginning, I could never imagined I would be doing this today, and I'm less anxious than I was at the start of the call. I don't know if you can notice, but I want people to have that hope and that faith, to understand things can absolutely change. I would never have dreamed 2 years ago I would be talking in front of many people at all, because at one point I didn't feel really comfortable talking in front of 2 or 3 people in a meeting, So I would really encourage people to seek help, but also those organisations invest in mental health and well-being. Look at your workplace culture, because it'll change things. I know Natalia will talk about it as well, but also I think there's one of my slides, and Andy will get to it, I'm sure. There are so many things that I think employers and managers don't know are available that they can access to support people. But as I say, the support at work completely changed my life. Amongst other things, yes, outside help, and I do share some contact details at the end. But yeah, it can change people's lives to well-being at work. Can I get the next slide, please? And again, there's the statistics, I suppose, just some of them as well. There was many statistics when I was looking. I bet we can relate to those statistics. 75% of employees are more likely to stay in a company that prioritizes well-being. How many times is it if you wish to leave a job, for example, because you didn't feel your well-being was being considered? And to employers, I suppose, how many times have you lost a real asset to your company due to maybe not getting those well-being initiatives right? Organisations investing in well-being experience, lower absenteeism. I always struggle with that word. Absenteeism and burnout rates. I've said, I don't mind sharing. I've certainly called in sick before in my careers and lied, about the reason I was doing so because I didn't feel comfortable in sharing the real reason, which was my mental health, And that'll be, because of the workplace culture, but also where I was at with my mental health, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do at all. I've done it. I can understand why people might do that. So employees in wellness programs experience 30% fewer stress-related health issues. And, I wanted to mention that there because this is serious. You can get stress-related health issues. I think sometimes we forget. And they can present physically as well. So yet another reason, I suppose, to ensure we take this seriously and, help in whichever way we can, And the last one there is organisations prioritising well-being, attract top talent and improve company reputation. And I wonder to the, employees there, do you feel that, I suppose, your employer is investing in your well-being currently? And hopefully during these sessions, you'll learn more about how they can and the support you can access. Can I get the next slide, please, Andy? Now, what I wanted to do, if you're feeling comfortable with it, is get you to consciously connect with your working day. I encourage this a lot with clients in the one-to-one sessions because often, again, I know I was guilty of it. I would kind of not relate my well-being at work. It's kind of like I'd leave it at the door and I couldn't really put the two together. But actually, we should absolutely consider our well-being at work, as soon as we walk through that door on the way to work and as soon as we get through the door. And I wanted to kind of invite you to look at your individual working day because it'll all be different for us all. And for a few minutes and please engage in the chat if you feel comfortable in doing so. What does your well-being at work look like for you? So is it connecting with your team? We've spoke a lot about connection, throughout this. Do you feel you can show up as your full self at work? Is it feeling, understood and valued? What's your workplace culture like? Is it feeling fulfilled within your role? Do you feel that you're supported to achieve those goals? And is it accessing employee wellbeing at work initiatives? Do you know what's going on, within your organization? Can you access them? Do you feel supported? Again, I'll refer back to earlier on today. I would hope that Andy supporting me throughout this is demonstrating that compassion, and that support for well-being that I'm talking about. If I think back to last week, somebody, a Posturite, was asking me for a particular file, and I was not really understanding how to do that. I always can get quite stressed about things like that and find them quite difficult. Before I even said anything, he'd requested the file, but he said, if you don't know how to do this, he has the instructions, which was great, which probably saved me an hour and a half of Googling and trying to find, and I can feel that distress. The same with things like spreadsheets, if I can use an example. I struggle with spreadsheets, 2 weeks ago, somebody had asked me to put some data into a spreadsheet. And I could feel myself tensing up. Of course, I've learned all these strategies that I share with clients as well to support them with distress in whatever way that looks like for them. And, you know, actually someone just said, I'll put it in for you. She put it in for me. And it's just little things like that. You can make a big difference, you know, to someone's experience in their working day, you know. So, and thanks for all the engagement in the chat. I've been having a read of a few
There
there,
is
but
quite there is quite a lot, right? I'm
yeah.
just picking up on one thing because I mentioned it in my introduction in terms of the significant change of working patterns over the last few years, and the obvious is due to the pandemic. And I remember as a company, we obviously we for years we've supported a lot of organisations with home working, and before COVID, we spoke to some organisations. I had conversations where we said, do you have home workers? And a lot of organisations said, no, we're not set up for home working. Now I'm going back to 2017, 2018, etc. It was thrust on everyone overnight. Everyone had no choice, and then it's kind of evolved over time, and we have the 3 days here, 2 days there, etc. This is probably when people are working from home. This is probably the thing that is being mentioned in the chat the most. Is people working from home means that people are out of sight, and to coin the phrase of out of sight, out of mind. It's just something that people need to be aware of, isn't it? That actually, if you do isolate individuals and people are working from home for extended periods of time, it's something that organisations need to be aware of. To think that
Yeah.
X hasn't been in the office for 3 weeks, and then we're not meeting up with colleagues, etc. It can have an impact, can't it?
I think it can have an impact on that. You know, I keep saying the word connection. You know, sometimes we can feel a bit disconnected from home, and it's looking about how we can feel connected, you know, linking in with team members you feel comfortable linking in with. I work from home now, and I make sure that I physically go out and see people, you know, during the week, just to have that connection I'm getting out, you know. I think Natalia, I'll mention, if I'm right, Andy, a bit about working from home
Hmm.
later on. But absolutely, I think we've changed the way we work, and therefore employers would benefit, I'm sure, from adapting, you know, the way they support their colleagues who work from home. Definitely,
on on
definitely.
on another conversation, I don't want to throw this. I'll mention it and move on. We spoke a lot in one of our previous webinars around neurodiversity that actually a lot of people that, for example, worked in the office developed particular coping strategies, not necessarily need to be neurodiverse, of course. People develop coping strategies to do their job, suddenly work from home and those coping strategies aren't in place because it was a work environment, and vice versa, that people do develop coping strategies and then have to work in a different environment, and it can have an impact, and it can have an impact on the individual's mental health for that reason. So yeah, there's a lot in this, isn't there, about the working environment actually having an impact. Interestingly, there's a few people that are saying that they feel that they do work in the office but still don't feel as supported that if they did work from home. So yeah, it's really interesting that a lot of people are sort of opening up and sharing the stories.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly one perhaps for you know team leaders or managers to really consider actually, you know, what's you know how are my colleagues are working from home, you know, and maybe asking their managers, can I have time to check in or just, you know, I suppose have a real think about, you'll have wellbeing policies, I'm sure, and things like that. Have a real think about how you might be able to support those colleagues working from home. Absolutely. Because we can connect, we do connect online. Everything's moved so forward, hasn't it? But actually, I know for me, I'm not sitting with a team. You know, for me to talk to people helps me get through my working day. You know, I actually have photos on my desk. Me and my friend joke about it, Team Rachael, you know, because that helps me because I'm working from home on my own. So I get a bit creative with it. But I think as well, if you are feeling isolated, there's also via your GP. My understanding is there's such a role as a social prescriber that you can access that will help you with feelings of isolation, as far as I'm aware, or could help you with that, and a number of other things. Can I get the next slide, please, Andy? There we go. How can we support, how can employers support employees? I think we've kind of touched on that a bit, but just to expand on it. Again, some of the research sharing positive experiences is associated with increased resilience. A study found that individuals who shared positive experiences reported higher levels of well-being and life satisfaction. So I would encourage you, if you can, to capture positive experiences from your employees. How can you do that? Well, capturing stories, and I suppose the environment matters as well. Do your members of staff feel comfortable enough or safe enough, or do they have the opportunity to communicate how they feel? Can they be true about their experience? Explore what works and build on that, or employees, implementing change, with the information they're getting, or they're keeping up to date with things. And consider team building opportunities. I think as long as they're inclusive, they can be really fun, light-hearted opportunities to promote well-being and come together to celebrate success. I mean, if we can think of times in our lives where we've done something at work and we've got a thank you, or we've been recognised for that, I can imagine it might have made you feel quite good. I know that, if I've been recognised for my efforts, I appreciate that, And again, employers can take action, by looking at their wellbeing initiatives. What have you got going on? What have you got? What are you doing? Is it regular? Is it consistent? Because it's good to introduce that, but I think keeping a consistency with it and a regular, I suppose, wellbeing initiative, a constant one, would be really beneficial for people, And I'm sure, a lot of the leaders, employers can probably relate to, what I've said there. And I hope the reason I'm asking so many questions is I'm wanting people to, really get curious about things, and inventive about maybe how they can support people, how they can make a change if things need to change. Next slide, please. How can we support each other at work? We spend I don't know, we all work different hours, surely, but, we spend a lot of our lives at work, don't we? And it's fostering a positive, compassionate and inclusive workspace, to promote well-being, capturing the stories of others, whether that's like one-to-one, with your manager or team leaders, or, chatting with your colleagues, capture people's stories and experiences and think about that, listening not only to respond, but to understand. I've certainly been guilty of this in my life, listening to respond. I think sometimes when we go to like a meeting or have a certain agenda, don't we? Or sometimes we feel rushed. And I think sometimes if we're in that state, we can sometimes miss what someone might be communicating with us. And educating ourselves about mental health. I know that there's mental health first aiders, for example, within spaces, and, taking time to learn how we can support others. I know that, we can do our own reading, and I would hope that, there's policies and procedures in place that, whereby people can go to understand, what support's available, how they can support. So it's really kind of tuning in to everyone's experience, which can feel a lot, granted, because you're there, you're doing your job, but, it's just little ways that you can perhaps, again, consciously connect with that connection and working day around you. Next slide, please. And, there is so much support available already that often we're not aware of. I know I wasn't aware of this stuff for a long time as, when I was employed. We can access occupational health. Now, what I will say is, with a lot of people I've worked with over the years, I've learned about experiences, different people's experiences with things. Sometimes, I feel an earlier occupational health assessment can really help rather than leaving it till later. So there's occupational health, but I understand, of course, there'll be different policies and procedures in different organisations that will say when that would be appropriate as well, of course. Human resources, employee assistance programs. I'm hearing more and more that employers are, inviting organisations to come in and talk about mental health. They're inviting movement like yoga, and other movements, exercises, and offering that to their employees, Wellness action plans, I really like these. You can get them via the Mind charity website, and you can go through them to support your wellbeing at work. It can provide some structure for you. And seeking support from management, if that feels comfortable, it can change things. It certainly changed, my experience, but I appreciate someone would have to feel comfortable with that. And if you don't feel comfortable in going to your manager, please learn of the other people you can contact or speak with in your organisation. And the Department for Work and Pensions offer an access to work grant for those people who may have a disability. You don't necessarily have to have an official diagnosis, but a lot of people don't realise they can access so much support through that grant in the form of equipment, coaching, disability impact training, awareness sessions, all sorts. So that's really, quite a lot that sometimes we don't even know is there. Next slide, please, Andy. And so what one thing can you change today? I suppose if we think back to the bit where you were considering, connecting with your working day and what that feels like, what that looks like. And today, if you can take away one thing that you can change in relation to your well-being at work, so your day at work, how can you support yourself to feel well at work? So what is the one thing, and again, I would encourage you to put it in the chat if you feel comfortable in sharing. What is the one thing you would like to change within your working day? And then I would consider, what are the perceived benefits of making this change? How will it make you feel, for example, relaxed, energized? And how will you implement the change? Will you start today? Will you set a reminder to prompt you to do that? Will you perhaps, set a goal with a colleague that will encourage you to action this? And how will you review how this feels? What can be really useful is just jotting down a couple of bullet points at the end of the day about how your new action has made you feel, and doing that over a matter of days and looking at hopefully the benefit of doing that. So there's all these little things we can do to cultivate well-being at work. And I would encourage you just to get a bit creative with that, if it feels comfortable to do so. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but I certainly have often felt I don't feel in control of my well-being, but actually there's so many little things we can do to try and make things a bit better for ourselves. Can we get the next slide, please, Andy? And this is what I was mentioning earlier, I've certainly, I know someone was asking a little earlier, where did you get your help from? Outside services as well. And, it's helpful for managers and leaders, but everyone as well, to be aware of these, and I would absolutely encourage you to reach out. So I'll keep that. That'll be, I think Andy was saying earlier, it's being sent out anyway, or has been sent out already, the slides. And I know this is recorded. So yeah, you can jot down that if that's going to be helpful as well. But thank you for listening all, and I hope that's really kind of provoked some thought around, changes we can make or how we might consider our well-being, at work. And, thank you for your compassion with me and in my story. And thank you, Andy, for your support. All right.
Thanks, Rachel. I think the one of the standout comments in the chat was that somebody puts their work phone in the shed at the end of the garden on a Friday as the best way for their own mental health, and I think I should follow suit and do the same thing. So yeah, thank you Thanks, Rachel. You'll still be around for Q&A. I know Natalia's waiting in the wings. I'll whiz through the next slide, please, because we've actually a lot of the queries we got prior to the webinar and during this webinar was actually around the support, and we just wanted to mention what support Posturite are offering at the minute to a lot of our clients, and hopefully this will be of use. That actually there's quite a few services now that you can facilitate through Posturite, through our enablement division, and these are on the screen now. So what we can help with are mental health workplace needs assessments, and I think that that's something that will hopefully be of interest to yourselves. What that will do, this will analyze a great deal of information around the individual. This is a one-to-one assessment, and it will discuss the individual's environments, working patterns, their tasks, looking into triggers, how to combat these with self-help, a lot of self-reflection, and that opportunity to discuss, and from here we can make recommendations and develop a strategy moving forward for the individual. So this is specifically around the workplace needs assessments. One of those recommendations within the workplace needs assessment may be strategy coaching, mental health one-to-one workplace strategy coaching. What that will do is it will assign a coach to that individual. It will look at the barriers, it will look at the triggers that individual may have, and then put those coping strategies in place to overcome these going forward, relating to their job role, relating to outside their job role, and ultimately prevent that build up. So extremely powerful sessions that can have a significant impact. And then finally as well, one thing that we're asked to do a lot of with a lot of our clients is awareness training, and we can help with mental health in the workplace awareness training. So this may be a great way to start and implement that open culture that we spoke about, and allowing people that. And one thing that was mentioned in the chat quite a lot, which I actually wrote down, was that safe environment, which is again two very powerful words, that safe environment for an individual, and it creates a lot more, may it create that kind of safe environment culture, that empathy to do awareness training, and allow individuals to recognize where others and their employees, their colleagues may need further support. So if you do have any queries around these services, again, please reach out. Everything will be emailed across post webinar. And I will now bring in Natalia, who's been waiting in the wings for a while. So thank you for joining us, Natalia. Great to have you with us. I
Hi,
think
Andy. Sorry, I think you need to enable my video because it says start my video. Super. Thank you so much. So we're not
there we
delaying
go.
anything. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. I think probably a great place to start is if you give us a bit of background
Yes.
information on yourself and your relationship with mental health.
Super. And I think we'll literally have the 10 seconds to maybe take a deep breath in. So I know you all been on the call, and I'm following fantastic chat from Rachel, which there's so many ideas and so many things I'm thinking about. So maybe we're just wherever you are, wherever you're sitting, maybe just sit comfortably and roll your shoulders back and open your chest. And we're going to take a deep inhale through the nose and out through the mouth. And one more in through the nose and out through the mouth. Lovely.
I
Okay.
needed that.
I think I needed that
I
too. So
needed
I think
that. Thank you.
everybody's like, oh, here we go. The crazy one will tell us to breathe. No, this is sometimes it's just lovely to take a breather. So little story about me. I don't come originally from like a wellness background. I come from a corporate background, and I hope you can hear the drilling in the background, which brings everything to reality. I come from medical device company, and I've always had interest in human, I guess, and mental health. And I always, when I mention it, people laugh. I always had this belief in like happy employee is productive employee. So when I kind of joined the workforce many years ago, I always wonder like why employers don't do a little bit more to make the employees feel better. There's so many simple things we could do. So I was kind of exploring that in the corporate world, and then the more I was exploring, I'm I'm in Ireland. I didn't mention that. I'm in Ireland, but I'm originally from Poland. So I moved to Ireland 18 years ago. And I was always looking for my tribe. I was always for my people, looking for my people. And I joined a yoga class, and that kind of opened my mind to something a little bit different. I wasn't into the gymnastics, whatever, but it just kind of made me feel the connection and have this tribe around me. And that kind of again opened my mind, slowed me down a little bit. And then I kind of went further and I started developing. And actually, during COVID, I was not that I was bored, but I was looking at something of development type. I was like, okay, we can't leave the house, we can't do anything. What can I do? So I found a postgrad in mental health and play in workplace health and well-being, and I've studied that, and then I completed the masters. And the more I kind of learned about it, I feel like there's two elements of me, and that's why I always love it's this kind of softer belief in mental health and the breath work and setting up boundaries, and then the other one is strategic. What realistically can we do, right? Because we talk about, and I love reading all the different ideas what your companies are doing, and I sometimes feel like they're a bit, don't want to insult anybody, maybe a little bit random, right? We at the moment we're doing in my company a step challenge, and these things come up every so often. But I kind of started thinking, okay, but what's the story we're trying to say here? What are we trying to deliver? What is the intention behind it? Because just to do a step challenge is great, but like, how do we measure that? Or how do we know that this is something that we want? What are we addressing? So that's kind of the strategic approach I was taking. And recently, actually, I've decided to torture myself further, and I am doing masters in psychotherapy. So again, we mentioned EAP and talking to people, and it's so funny because I'm on this call, and I've given talks, and I've done lectures in college, but 400 people. I was the same as Rachael. My body was this morning. I was like, oh my gosh. So I've been through it all in the way. I've touched on burnout myself and being completely attached to my phone. Embarrassingly, you'll be on the bathroom, and I'd say a few of us will be there where you're still checking your emails, and it's in the evening, or you're having a glass of wine on Friday evening and you're checking the email on the phone or seeing what's going on. And, got to the stage when I was like, this is not healthy. Like my body was tense. And then there is a lot, obviously, conversations about what burnout now. And again, there's these different, and I love the remote work conversation in the group as well, because this is actually thesis that I've done around, and there's so many risks associated, but we're kind of picking and trying to guess what should we do and how should we do it. So that's kind of in a nutshell my story about and my background around it. And my relationship with mental health, it's still work in progress. It's never the same, and it's never perfect. I don't wake up at 1 a.m. and meditate and have it, let's be honest, nobody has a time for that. And I don't even have a kid. So I always have a huge appreciation and respect for people with kids when they're rushing in the morning, etc. And I don't have a time for that, or I'm too tired simply. So sometimes I get up and it's like, what is the best I can do today? And sometimes it's putting mascara on. It'll make a difference. Sometimes it'll be like, I'll just wear a comfy clothes because I work from home mainly. And, the reality, there is so much online. There's so much around wellness, and makes us feel nearly anxious about these, like how we should be operating every morning. You should be stretching, etc. Sometimes just 5 seconds breath work will really make an impact. So yeah, so that's kind of my background, Andy.
Fantastic. I think we've spoke quite a lot around maybe the sort of the first steps for an individual. So I don't know whether you have any advice for employees that are discussing mental health internally within their organization, and who to bring this up with. We'll have a lot of people on the call that will probably have two hats on, so to speak, or somebody will be tuning in to think, well, actually, I want to have a conversation about this, or actually this second one is, how do we help people that may want to have a conversation and put their hand up? Where do we go?
Yeah, I think sometimes, we are as an employee, let's say, we kind of get into this bubble of we're not being supported, and, rightly so most of the time. But sometimes, there is a bit of that personal responsibility in us. Is like, if we want things to change, we can try, right? We could fail, And what is the worst thing that will happen? What happened with me, I still in corporate, not being in my previous job in medical device, I didn't, there was no wellness, there was, but I've recognized the gap. We had a manufacturing and they were all stretching every morning. And then there was office workers and they had a kind of different setup. And I started looking at the EHS and I was saying, why did the manufacturing workers have like a plan of doing ergonomic stretching programs every morning? I said, why there is nothing for office workers? And then because I was so passionate about it, I built a case around it. So what I'll say is if you feel like there is something, you have an idea, go with it. Pick a group of people. I find doing a little pilot of, finding a group and measuring. Again, when you're talking, you have to have that leadership buy-in. You have to have, and I know it's cringy because you think, they should know, but then they'll never listen to you. If you tell them that you want to relax, etc., I did see the senior leadership, eyes gone. And once you started speaking about numbers and proof and research, there you have it. It's what is actually, happening. And well, I had 10 people and we've piloted ergonomic stretching programs and we did a survey before and after and see how they felt. And I went in the leadership side. Also, we did it in the area we were sitting. So we had the time that we were all getting up and doing it, whoever was available or free. Again, there was no pressure, but managers and leaders would pass and watch what we're doing, and then people really in the month felt a difference. So kind of doing something smart in a way, tracking it, even like with the step challenge, started taking little notes, saying, there was 15 groups joined, 45 people out of how many people, there's simple little numbers will really help you build a case around this is important. I always think as well, sometimes we're guessing what people want. We're guessing maybe we see things from our perspective, but there is so much, like you mentioned, neurodiversity and, different groups of people that maybe we're not reaching or they have a different needs or would like to see different things. Simple survey or simple poll or a conversation with people being like, if there was one thing we could do, what would that be? And there is a lot of things available, as Rachael said, free too. There's companies out there that would love to come in. If there is a health insurance in place in your workplace, they usually have guest speakers in their back pockets that they can bring into your companies, etc. Again, try to avoid the randomness of we have a speaker here. It's like think about for, let's say, in a year of like what you would want to achieve or that one initiative, even bringing EAP in place, right? Maybe you don't have employee assistance program, which I think it's a key for every employee, and then doing education around it. You don't have to do it. If you have a vendor or you have somebody who helps you with EAP, they'll provide loads of information for you that you can just you can outsource that and bringing it into people. And just again, keeping little notes of different data that is available, that will help you to get that kind of buy-in. Because I always say, I have this phrase, it's not all about eating peppers and stretching, because that's what people think in wellness. And that's, I think, we're shown in the social media, zen and drinking and eating fantastic. And in the real world, we're probably working for 10 hours a day. You didn't have a time even to get up of your desk. Somebody said, we're eating at our desk. So like, what are the things we can actually do today? What would make a difference? Maybe bringing in saying, on Friday, once a month, we'll do meeting free Friday. There is so many initiatives that we could kind of bring forward. And what is the worst thing that will happen? You'll be turned down. Fine, like you'll be turned down. You tried. You could say you tried, but then you build your own little initiatives and things maybe that will help you, and then bring it back to you. So I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. We spoke in the week about a sort of scenario I was aware of a few years ago with a small organization. And what the wellbeing manager did was, because it was a small organization, he put a bin by the door on a Friday with a bucket full of tennis balls. He put two bins. One was a good week, one was a bad week. And the employees on the way out, they put the tennis ball in the good week if they'd had a good week, and the bad week if they had the bad week. Now, obviously, there's a lot more content to that. However, the wellbeing manager had a general idea of the morale in the office and how his employees were feeling, and reacted off that on the next week. And if he was trying something, there was some kind of measurement. I mean, this was quite a few years ago he did this, and there's a lot more better ways potentially to measure this now. But it could be that simple, couldn't it?
So simple. And like that, like somebody said in the group, you'll be telling people what, or again, it can be sometimes a tick box, but it's like pick one thing, one initiative or one impactful thing that you think is going to make a difference, and think maybe of you But ask people, if you're in a HR or employer situation, ask people. And I feel, again, happy employee is productive employee. Who doesn't want that? It's not always in the end, okay, financially and, living crisis, all that is important. But sometimes creating that culture really makes a difference, really creates that healthy culture, supportive culture where people can talk to each other. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something that thanks to Jim in the chat, because I want to read it out. He's put well-being engagement means asking people what they think, not telling
Exactly.
them.
Not telling them.
I think that's such a brilliant way to put it. Yeah, apologies, we may run over 12. Hopefully, everyone can still continue to join us. We don't want to cut it short when we've still got quite a few questions that you have sent in. Final one for yourself, Natalia, before I bring Rachel back in, is how can an organisation make mental health a priority within their workplace?
How they can make a priority. That's again, maybe bringing. We talked about policies. We're assuming there's policies in place as a HR. Maybe create a well-being policy. Maybe bring the well-being of, include them in the core values. Bring them as a as a solution to. And again, you need to kind of measure it and see what it is. Appoint mental health champions. We talked about that. It's you will always have few people in organizations that would be very passionate about it, and then why not give them a chance and help get you to help. If you don't have resources available, appoint mental health champions, see if there's anybody available, and they'll help you drive these initiatives. Training. People around the mental health stigma, how to talk to people. We're still I still sometimes think we have a long way to go about the taboo and talking about mental health and stress and burnout. And look, let's be honest, a lot of people don't want to say they're stressed because they think it might affect their performance and how they're seen when it comes to if they want to be promoted. But that's not a weakness, looking after yourself. You don't want to get to the stage where, don't mind the promotion, you're physically completely, burned out. You're not good for your families, your friends, for yourself. Don't mentioning at the workplace. And we spend so many hours and days and months at work that, trying to create this as best as possible. Some of us work in toxic environments, some of us less, some of them very supportive ones. So you have to look at yourself and see what is that looks like for you. If somebody just mentioned that, I'm going to be working from home remotely, set a boundaries. That's very important. If you're working from home, setting a boundaries and sticking with it, because nobody else will type and say, why are you working lunchtime? Nobody will say that. You're the person that say, that's it, I'm on lunchtime. And people respect you for it. I can tell you people respect you for it. I don't take meetings on Friday afternoon. I say, I don't take meetings Friday afternoon. Let's find another way. There is no problem about that. Again, it's respect for your time, for your job. Closing the door on Friday evening to my office. Setting yourself up is very important because, again, some of us are working remotely since COVID and we still haven't really put our things in place because we still think this is going to change, but things are not changing. So let's make sure we don't break our bodies. Because as my thesis showed, when it comes to remote working, social isolation and physical activities are inactivity, really. It's the negative effects. Everything else is great. The flexibility we got, maybe a little bit more work-life balance that we can pop in and out, but the social isolation, so making sure that you're connect with people, your colleagues, maybe go to the office every so often, maybe build a community around you that you just get yourself out of the house, if it's a gym or if it's whatever you're into. And then the boundaries. But going back, how you can make your organization prioritize trainings, EAP. I think employee assistance program, it's a must. Like that's my baseline for anything we ever do. Like you have to have, and if you have a mental health, private health insurance, they would probably have EAP. So be smart about it. It doesn't have to be costing a lot of money. There is a lot of organizations that you can just use and they offer free support. So why not utilize that? You don't have to kind of be hard on yourself being like, we don't have a budget, so we can't spend money. Because again, a lot is down to money, right? So it's just seeing what can we do and how can we be smart about it. Reach out to company and saying, hey, we're this company, we're looking for some help, and then sharing resources, tools, little tips and tricks. Again, having the champions would really help. There's so much resources out there. Again, it's finding what are the risks in your workplace. Is it more people remotely? Is it a lot of people on site? right? Are meetings productive? Your day is set up right? Do you have too many meetings? So kind of there is so many little things that you can bring in that will make a big difference. When I was talking to my husband about ergonomic stretching, he's like, I thought you were coming to talk about mental health. And I was like, but that's part of it. Because if you step from your laptop, I always say, if you spend 4 hours straight on the laptop working on something, the best thing you could do for yourself is step away for 15 minutes, take a coffee, go for a walk. You come back, you look at things so differently. You'll see things you haven't seen in 4 hours. So that's what I'm trying to say. Work smart, not hard, and prioritize your mental health. I'm trying to empower people, being like, it's within you, and what is the worst case is that it will happen. It's not going to happen, or you've been going to shut down. That's fine. That's fine. But then you look after you. So you do what's right for you, especially if you want to do it for your colleagues.
That's great. Thanks, Natalia. I'll bring Rachael in. For those that need to drop off, it will be on the website, so you can get the bit that you don't see, if that's okay. It's all on there. We'll probably go for around 5 to 10 minutes. Hopefully, the majority can still stick around, because there's a few questions that have come in. If I can bring this to both of you, if that's okay, we've touched on it in terms of it being a scenario, but not necessarily significantly the impacts. What impact on mental health well-being are you seeing with staff working from home full time? So we did touch on the isolation, but what impact are we seeing? Are we seeing this, or is it an anecdotal, or is there any sort of evidence to support something like this in terms of people working from home full time?
Yeah, I can take that, Andy, if that's okay. Yeah, and I guess that covers with my thesis. And actually, to be honest, I'm seeing it myself because I've worked remotely since COVID. So again, it's there's a great sense of flexibility, work-life balance. There is, right? Again, if you keep yourself accountable to different things, and people feel more productive, they don't feel distracted. I go to the office maybe once a quarter or so with my team, and it's simply nearly social, because I am so distracted. I can't think. I'm just keep looking left, right, and center. Then you're getting the coffee chats, which are great for the social element. But I do notice that, when I'm in the zone, if I can sit down, you're not disturbed, you're not distracted, which sometimes can go too far. You're very effective, you're efficient, you're productive, you're doing a lot. It's just that kind of ability to disconnect yourself. And again, that's kind of on you of what you're doing. Have you a routine when you finish work? So I try to go for a walk, even if it's 5 minutes. I'm in Ireland, so I'm the same situations. I'm now in Mauritius here with the weather. But you're trying even to go for 5 minutes just to kind of like tell your brain that you finished, and then keeping yourself accountable not to go in. Social isolation, loneliness, and physical inactivity, because we're sitting more. We don't have, the walks in the corridor, going for lunchtime, stepping away from your desk physically. We're starting to bring things into our desk. So physical inactivity, so making routine. We're coming into summer, so let's set a little routine and keep yourself, what can you do? Like when that walk could happen. If you're not a morning person, or you have kids, or if it's not a lunchtime, if it's evening, find a time. Even if I always say go for 5 minutes, you always go for longer, but say to yourself, you go for 5 minutes, or do little stretches or anything that you could do. And then the social isolation. Yeah, I see it in myself. I go weird going to the shop, and you see humans, and maybe you haven't really talked to anybody outside of online world, and you get funny. And I've noticed that, and even going to concerts, I kind of got really anxious with the crowds, and I was like, gosh, that's not me. Like, I'm very social. I love going out and, to people. And I was just last year, I was like, I need to make more effort. Again, recognizing this, which is a big step, recognizing it's like, why do I feel like that? Again, I'm at home, so maybe I just need to get out but yes, there is evidence that the loneliness, I think loneliness, not just remote working, but in the current world, it's a new epidemic. We're feeling, even though we're spending so many time and we have so many friends on social media, we're more lonely than ever. And there is a lot of studies coming up about that. So yeah, that's the sad part. Yeah.
Thanks, Natalia. Rachael, if I just bring yourself back in now with this question, I think it's a really good question that was sent in to us. Why do we think making time for wellness can be misunderstood as being self-indulgent?
Well, that's a good question. I think it can begin from maybe the environment we're brought up in when we're younger, learning from our parents, there was different culture back then, how did they perceive well-being? And then it's about learning as an adult as well. What does well-being look like? Does it feel self-indulgent? I think sometimes, it can be sold to us, by advertisements or whatever, that it has to be extravagant. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And I think it really, it depends on, our society and how they see it, but also the workplace culture as well. And I think, again, using a compassionate approach and encouraging people to take care of the well-being and prioritize that. And actually, teaching people how to do that, because a lot of people, across my journey, and certainly me personally, I didn't necessarily learn or know how to do that. I thought it was going out buying what I wanted, lovely clothes and stuff like that. And it can be that, it can make you feel lovely. But actually, it's just being consistent. Am I eating right? Am I sleeping right? Keep it simple. It doesn't have to be indulgent, or it can be if you want it to be.
I've written consistent down from a couple of conversations and things that have come up of actually trying to have some consistency in what you do, and not having that build up of sort of triggers really, and being consistent in what suits yourself. I think that probably a lot of this goes back to the asking the question. There's quite a few people from your question to tell you on people working from home, that actually a lot of people saying, well, I actually prefer to work from home. It's great. It suits me. And it goes back to the earlier point that Jim made in the chat of actually ask people, instead of telling them, you will work in the office. Well, hang on a minute. You get a lot more out of me if you let me work from home for 4 days a week. So it is asking that question, isn't it? But in terms of the self-indulgence, I think that's a really good point, because that comes back to the opening up and that environment, isn't it? To think we need to create that culture and that empathy to receive the conversation, and actually for somebody to be comfortable enough to talk about it, and how that response will be when somebody does have that conversation. I think it was a really good question that came in. Just one more thing as well. We got quite a few questions, and we've touched on the sort of initiatives within work. And just to put this to both, if we can share any good practice in terms of measuring outcomes of initiatives. We have touched on it, but if we are implementing any kind of workplace initiatives, how do we know what has been well received? How do we know what has helped individuals? If there are any good points around this.
Yeah, I think as I kind of mentioned, from my point, I try to, before you start your initiative, you really need to think about what is that you're really trying to achieve. Let's say with the steps challenge, and I'll just give an example. We're talking about steps challenge, and maybe we saw the engagement down. So okay, to measure what you're trying to measure, you need to think what you're trying to measure. So you're starting initiative and what you want to achieve. So again, maybe it's engagement, maybe it's the physical activity, getting people moving, and maybe getting people more chatting to each other. Maybe you saw a drop in teams and people are maybe not engaging as much. So then when you have few of these kind of plan in place, you launch it, and then your keys, again, as I said, along the way, start to measure as much as you can. Maybe do a survey before, or poll before, how you feel after winter, etc. So measure all that. Then you have how many people participated, how many people, engaged throughout. Do you see any engagement even on the chat box? Again, something simple. And then maybe after, again, it doesn't have to be survey. I know it can be survey fatigue. You could do a short poll saying, did you enjoy this? Would you like to see more of it? Again, ask the people. Try to measure. With well-being, it can be difficult. Satisfaction is one, engagement is one, the psychological safety is one thing to measure as well. If you have an EAP provider, you could ask them, they could give you actually number. Again, it's anonymous, but they could give you how many people use the services from your company. Now, if your company is a little bit bigger, if your company is very small, they might not, but they actually can give you high level of number of calls monthly, or maybe quarterly if they can give you that, just to not identify somebody. So you actually might see, oh my gosh, there is, 20 calls a month. So you could kind of start measuring and looking into it, and they'll give you, and they'll share that with you. If you're providing resources, we always, with my team, and I have a fantastic team, what we'll do when we share any links, we put things in the background that you can measure amount of clicks, or maybe see if we can have an interactive click on that if you liked it, your likes on Teams or whatever. They're all numbers, they're all measures. Like, it doesn't have to, people sometimes are tired of commenting, but like, it's quick. It's the quick things, right? It's the short videos, how many people viewed it, how many clicked on it. And again, we're doing every second quarter, we do a survey as well, well-being survey, when we ask questions, and we track that on our famous Excels, which everybody loves, obviously. But that's kind of from my side when it comes to data. Watching trends as well, what's coming up, even social media, as much as it's bad, or TikTok, it shows you what's trending. Because again, sometimes there's just perspective that we have and the perspective we don't. Maybe a younger generation, maybe they're looking at different things, we're trying to guess. So seeing what trending, what words, changing word. We changed actually words, wellness to well-being last year, because we found wellness was overused. There was a wellness cups, wellness tissues, wellness cups, but bottles, everything was wellness. And I was like, it's just losing what we're trying to do. It's mental health we're addressing. So we kind of changed it around, saying it's well-being. We're looking after mental health, psychological safety and well-being. So we kind of took the wellness out of it.
Fantastic. I think just taking it maybe a step before then, we've had a really good question in terms of the sort of proactiveness, really. And obviously, we want to have these initiatives. We put these initiatives in place. We've had a question through. How do you think it is best to engage people on a well-being journey, particularly those who think well-being is a nice to have, don't think it applies to them, don't have time, and then to progress that as well in the chat. Bethany, thanks for putting that through. That actually, a lot of the times people may engage in these when they're at the point of burnout, and actually we want to implement these things and engage people obviously a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, I think, early intervention is paramount. And I see that, throughout my nursing career, but I continue to see that. And I think I mentioned it earlier. Sometimes, you're right in what you're saying, Andy. Sometimes it gets someone to go to burnout, a crisis point, where then they get the package of, workplace care, if you like, and I think it's about being proactive, and that word consistent again. Employers, giving managers and leaders that awareness training, that understanding, and cultivating time out for that. And I know there's time pressures in businesses, I know that, but actually, it's an investment, it really is. But I think consistent early intervention, and recognizing when someone's struggling, having training around that, but also, having a solid, consistent plan in place.
Fantastic. Final one, as I'm aware of time, people do have meetings, etc. to go on to. We do have a question about unions and what role. A couple of people have mentioned unions in the chat. What role can unions play with health and well-being? They have a lot of experience in this area and supporting employees.
Yeah, I have to say I don't have a huge amount of experience with unions, but I guess, if they do, if people come into unions and flagging something, I kind of think it's a discussion that needs to be had. You have your HR departments and other departments. I don't know again how it works exactly, so I don't want to really give the wrong advice, but I feel everything can happen through discussion, with kind of intentional approach of like, we're all here for the good cause and we want to improve things. What can we do? Can we have this discussion about we're seeing increase, or people are coming into us? What services you have available? Again, HR or benefits department, whatever you have, would have either EAP services, and then maybe people are unaware. There is no education around it. Maybe there is a gap that you can identify and bring it into HR or management and say, okay, we need to put this in place because this is a baseline. Again, there's policies in place, so asking if there is a policy in place or any kind of procedures or processes around what happens to that. Usually, I presume it's HR. Probably it'll be a good point of contact as well. You probably know better. Rachael, you might have any other experience?
I think, unions can be very helpful in terms of that connection and that advocating if you're feeling particularly alone, if you don't feel comfortable in speaking to your line manager, and my understanding is they would know what support you can access. Not only that, they'll be able to advise you of that, but they'll be able to support you, I think, in the process of accessing that support at work,
Fantastic. Thank you. I think we are running out of time. I just want to finish off really with just in terms of support. Obviously, the presentation has been emailed out and will get emailed out again tomorrow. Rachel's slides included a lot of support and contacts on there. Likewise, in terms of from an organisation point of view, and the services that Posturite are helping a lot of organisations with around mental health, workplace needs assessment, strategy coaching, awareness sessions. If you do want to have further conversations around that, please do get in touch. And likewise with specific questions to Natalia and Rachel, and we can facilitate that and forward those questions on for the conversation to continue post webinar. So yeah, I will just finish by thanking Natalia, thanking Rachel very much for your contribution and a lot of honesty as well. I think the stories resonate with people more than anything, and really appreciate your honesty within both conversations there. Thank you to everyone for engaging, asking questions, jumping on the chat. If we haven't responded to anything you've engaged with, we will get in touch with you, and hopefully we will see you on the next webinar. So thank you very much.